beauty is objective. It has a subjective dimension, meaning it is something that beautiful things are experienced by different people in different contexts and times and places differently, and people have different tastes. And yet, beautiful things that we don't appreciate, we can learn to appreciate because there's a rational side to beauty too. It's not just aesthetic. It's not just a matter of taste, subjective opinion. There are reasons why things are beautiful. And that's a pretty foreign idea today.
Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Welcome, everybody, to the next chapter with Charlie. I am with a very special guest today, Matt Smith. Matt is, you know what? I was going to tell you about Matt, and Matt has a book on beauty that we're going to focus a lot of time today on beauty. And it's not about aesthetics, and it's not about Hollywood beauty. It's about a virtuous kind of beauty, and it's a very different sort of take on it that I am loving the take. But Matt is an educator first, and I wrote here that beauty is more about goodness and truth than it is about aesthetics. And let's see what Matt Smith has to say. Matt, start right where you left off.
Charlie, great to be on here.
Thank you.
Beauty does have much more to do with goodness and truth than it does to do with aesthetics. And as you say, I come at a topic like beauty not as an expert on beauty. I don't even know what that would mean, but as an educator. I come from an educational background. My graduate degrees are in literature, pretty obscure stuff, actually, medieval and Renaissance literature, historical drama. I do a lot of writing on Shakespeare.
Really?
Dip my toe into classical philosophy a lot. And so beauty there is no field where people study beauty, no academic discipline. Somebody has to sort of find their way there because they think there's a need to think about it more carefully.
And since it's not taught, there's no criteria, there's no guidelines to what beauty really is.
But correct. And in fact, the reason why I wrote a book about beauty is that at the small alternative college of which I have the pleasure to be a founder, but also teach, I wanted to teach a class on beauty. And for me, what that meant at our college, since our students study the history of thought, not in textbooks or lectures or videos, but by reading the most important historical texts that still exist today, I wanted to teach a great books, what we call a great books course on beauty. So I wanted students to study beauty by reading the most important historical, including ancient historical authors on beauty. And I already had some in mind. I wanted to read Plato and Aristotle and Augustine. These are names that lots of listeners will have heard of, some of whom...
But never attributed to beauty. Never put beauty to them.
And then many other authors, fewer people have heard of: Boethius, Plotinus, Pseudo-Dionysius, Hildegard. And so in doing this, these days when somebody creates a new college course, it's prudent for them to look online. Have other people taught a course like this? What books have they taught? What assignments have they crafted to get ideas? Why not? This is an online community of educators. And I was surprised to find, a big goose egg. 0 courses existed of the kind that I wanted to teach about beauty. And I thought of as a pretty pressing topic. Goodness, truth, beauty are these 3 great transcendentals that students of the liberal arts like me tend to look into and teach and talk about.
I see. I've never heard that. Goodness, truth, and beauty.
Goodness, truth, and beauty. Yeah, people in the industry endearingly call them the GTB, goodness, truth, and beauty. But people, as you know, talk about goodness all the time. We're fighting as a society over moral superiority. We're trying to police other people into adopting our own moral views of what's right and wrong. Similarly, with truth, we're really suspicious of truth claims. We we're not, as a society, aligned on what kinds of evidence or demonstration is proof of truth. We are suspicious of fake news and confirmation bias and things like that. And so I thought, we're a little bit messed up when it comes to our practices around goodness and truth. Well, what about beauty? Let's study that. There were no courses on it, but there were courses on what's called aesthetics, which aesthetics is the study, it depends on who you ask, it could be the study of the kind of superficial appearance of beauty, how things look or hear, if they sound nice, or it could be the study of the kind of pleasure that people naturally experience with beautiful things. So aesthetic beauty, decoration, ornament, prettiness, the beautiful appearance of a person, whatever it might be. And that's not what I was interested in. And there were also classes on the philosophy of aesthetics. That is this great turn to aesthetics when people stopped talking about beauty in one way and began talking about beauty exclusively as a psychological and social phenomenon. Beauty became a product of an age. This is, think of the early 1800s as the turning point here. And I was astounded. There's no course that's looking at this great, what I ended up calling lost tradition of beauty, the title of the forthcoming book, this lost tradition of writing on beauty. And so I taught this course, I built it and I taught it. And I had a revelatory experience myself, and my students, I think, had a revelatory experience. And we, in a sense, our eyes were open to, wow, this way that people used to talk about beauty is not how we talk about it today. And
so give me some distinctions. Give me a then until now, or a now from then.
Sure. So now people, one adage that a lot of people have heard is this statement that beauty exists in the eye of the beholder. Beauty exists in the eye of the beholder. And in the 1800s and early 1900s, people began saying things like this. And what it means is, well, there is no such thing as beauty objectively. That is, beauty outside of us, that comes down to us from on high, or that can be judged objectively. Rather, beauty is subjective, meaning it is produced by the subject, the perceiver, the person experiencing beauty, such that it exists in your eye. So, you might hear someone say, "Oh, you can't tell me that this is beautiful for me. Maybe it's beautiful for you, but what's beautiful for me might not be beautiful for you, and vice versa." That's a very modern attitude about beauty.
Right.
What is true, and what I think writers and great thinkers have always agreed on, is that people have different tastes. I love spicy food. Maybe you don't like spicy food. I love classic rock. Maybe you don't find classic rock nice to listen to, whatever it might be. I like a certain fashion. You like another fashion. That's true. Everybody agrees on that. Of course, we all have different tastes. But historically, people treated beauty with more, I want to call it intellectual muscularity, meaning it was something that you could actually learn from. It wasn't just a matter of taste. It didn't merely exist in the eye of the beholder. Beauty was something that existed in the world, that all of our beautiful experiences participated in. So I'll give you an example, Charlie. So imagine that we were looking at a painting, and imagine it was a painting that you found. Let's take an example. I know that you have an interest in bridges, right? You find bridges beautiful. I don't know if that's the first word that would come to your mind, but for the sake of conversation, you have a bridge in mind. You've taken a photograph of it. You find this bridge beautiful. Imagine I'm someone who's never thought about bridges carefully in my life, and we're looking at a bridge together, and you say, "Matt, wow, what a beautiful bridge." And I say, "I don't think so, Charlie. It's just a bridge. It's just functional."
It's a functional
little
way
bit
to get
ugly
from one side of the river to the other.
Right? What are you going to do? If you're somebody who knows about that bridge, if you know why it was built, who commissioned it, if you know something about the architect and engineers behind it, if you know something about how it's reflecting some of the architectural motifs through the city that's near it, if you know something about the people who use it and have used it historically, if you can tell me something about the architectural genre of bridges in general, and you know something about the physics of it, and you share that information with me, I'm likely to think, you know what, you're right. It is beautiful. In other words, what's just happened in this imagined scenario where is that you think the bridge is beautiful, I don't. You teach me something about the bridge and maybe about bridges in general, and all of a sudden I changed my mind. What that means is that there's rational information, there's real knowledge I can gain that changes my opinion about beauty. And that's not how mere tastes work. If beauty was just a matter of taste, you couldn't convince me or persuade me that something is beautiful. Just like if you hate spicy food and it gives you a headache every time you eat it, I can't give you a lecture about spicy food and all of a sudden you start enjoying spicy food.
Right.
So one of the deliverances that the great tradition of writing on beauty gives us is that beauty is objective. It has a subjective dimension, meaning it is something that beautiful things are experienced by different people in different contexts and times and places differently, and people have different tastes. And yet, beautiful things that we don't appreciate, we can learn to appreciate because there's a rational side to beauty too. It's not just aesthetic. It's not just a matter of taste, subjective opinion. There are reasons why things are beautiful. And that's a pretty foreign idea today.
Give me an idea. Give me some examples of what that would look like, because I know our audience is a bit lost.
Okay, so let you have the bridge example. You might have example of a painting. We're looking at a painting together, and I don't recognize the subject of it, and so I don't take any appreciation in its beauty. You do recognize the subject of it, so you recognize, oh, actually, that's Prince so-and-so from Hungary in whatever year, and you tell me about that person, and now I can understand a little bit better. Because I have more knowledge about the subject I'm looking at, what this painting might be doing, what the artist might have been doing with his subject, what he might be expressing about this certain prince in this portrait, and I come to appreciate it more. Would be one example of the objectivity of beauty. And by that, I simply mean that beauty, as Roger Scruton, contemporary philosopher, as well as romantic German rationalist philosopher named Immanuel Kant said, beauty is rational. This is a weird sentence to say, beauty is rational. It's not.
It is rational or irrational?
Rational, meaning
it is rational.
There are reasons for things being beautiful. I think that we have inherited an attitude and understanding of beauty that is impoverished by the fact that we have stripped beauty of its rational side. And when I say that, all I mean is that there are reasons why things are beautiful and why some things aren't beautiful. Just like there are reasons why certain actions are good and certain actions are evil. I can give you reasons why you're in the supermarket, somebody who's rather infirm falls over. I can give you reasons why it's good for you, morally good for you to help that person to their feet or help them in some way. It's not just because it feels good. The same thing goes with beauty. There are reasons why things are beautiful and there are some people who try to really create a formal template for understanding that. And I'm not really I don't see that reflected in the great tradition of writing on beauty. What I mean is, if someone says, for a building to be beautiful, it needs to have represented very specific proportions. The angles need to be a certain degrees in relation to each other. The walls need to only be load-bearing walls. There can be no ornamental walls. You can't have anything like cantilevers or funny, unnecessary arches or spires. It needs to be, whatever someone's opinion about that might be. There are some people who think that beauty is all about a very structured sense of proportion, and that we can write down those rules, and anything that falls outside the lines of that is not beautiful. That's a radical oversimplification of, I think, a traditional view about beauty. Instead, who knows? I'm not one to say what's beautiful and what's not beautiful on a large scale, But I think that for somebody to find something beautiful, they have to be able to give some reasons why that thing is beautiful. Otherwise, they're simply enjoying the thing, which is fine, that's good, but they're not being transformed by the beauty of it. And I think you can see this. Another example would be music. Music is one of the great art forms when it comes to thinking about beauty. I am not a classically trained musician. I'm a garage band musician. My brother and I get together and we'll jam and we'll play drums or keyboards or guitar or whatever it might be, and we'll rotate instruments. We're not particularly good at any of them. We're both terrible singers, but we both sing all the time, and that's the extent of my musical. I love music. That's how I can play music. But my son, who's 11, plays piano, and he's been playing for a few years, and he's rather good at piano at this point. And I just last weekend had the pleasure of hearing him perform, watching him perform at a concert hall at a local college.
Oh, really?
With the composer present of the piece he was playing. And after he played his piece, and there was a bunch of people that played, and the concert was, I was amazed, of course, at his playing. He's playing piano. It was beautiful. I could never do that. He was playing with his body, and he was moving, and you can really hear the passion behind it. He's only 11 years old. Afterwards, the composer who wrote the song came up to my family and complimented my son and said, that was very good. And it said some things about the song that she appreciated his performance about. And I listened to my son respond to the composer in ways that they weren't over my head, but it was clear that what he said to her and what she was saying to him, these two people both classically trained in music, was something that I didn't have access to. Their understanding, their experiential and also intellectual understanding of piano playing was something I didn't have access to. And it was beautiful to them in a way that transformed their lives in ways that I can't really access without knowing how to play piano that way. Having both the practitioner knowledge, but also the intellectual knowledge of how to do it. And that's what I mean when I say beauty transforming you. I bet a lot of listeners can think of things that they find really beautiful that have changed their lives, including people that have changed their lives, or their faith that has changed their lives, or something. And that's what beauty has the power to do that other ideals like goodness or truth doesn't have the power to do as much. Is that beauty can change you, and when you truly understand something deeply, it becomes beautiful in a new way. Just like you meet somebody, you're 20 years old, you meet somebody that you think is really attractive physically, and you talk to them and you think, oh, they have a really cool personality, and you're a little bit infatuated. But if you end up marrying that person, it's not until 25 years later, when you've truly come to know the person, that your love for them, though it's been through a billion trials, has deepened into a way where that person has legitimately changed who you are too. That's how beauty works. There's a rational side. It takes time. It's related to the growth and progress of our souls. And it's something that nobody talks about today because we've forgotten the great writers on beauty. And we've forgotten what they've given us.
Yeah, and I don't even know the great writers on beauty.
Yeah, so these used to be household names, and they're people, they're authors that most people have simply never read. I'm talking about ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, and I'm thinking of late Roman and early medieval authors like Augustine, who wrote the Confessions and the City of God, and a great book called On the Order of Things, which is about beauty. And Boethius, who wrote a book on music called De Musica.
Oh, did he? I'm familiar with Constellations. I've not read it. Yes. We talked about that, but I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that. I know he had a very fascinating lifestyle.
Even the book that the Constellation of Philosophy, is this book about remembering philosophy, and Boethius is a character, and he's also the author, and it's a conversation, it's a dialogue. He's talking to Lady Philosophy throughout the book, and every chapter of the book is interspersed with a poem or a song. So you read, 9 pages of dialogue, philosophical dialogue, and then all of a sudden there's a poem or song interspersed in there. Why is he doing that? Why is he mixing in this art form with a philosophical treatise? Because what he wants to construe, what Boethius wants the reader to receive about philosophy and about wisdom, it can't simply be taught didactically. I can't just tell you, oh, this is what wisdom is. You have to experience it and engage it. And something that is overtly beautiful, like a song or poem, is one way to do that. And I think that is something that has survived for how we think about beauty and experience it today, is people do think about beauty as making good things palatable. Beauty makes good things palatable, right? There might be a nice lesson that a child should learn, but if you just tell them the lesson, it might not receive it. If you make it palatable to them by making it fun or attractive, or telling it in the form of a story, or singing it in the form of a song, they come to enjoy it, and then that lesson becomes palatable to them. They become receptive to it in a new way. That is an old idea that we still retain today, but it's only a tiny piece of the puzzle of what beauty has to offer us.
How did that? Now you mentioned a triad of things. You talked about goodness, truth, and beauty. How do goodness and truth compare to beauty in the way you're explaining?
Yeah, what an enormous question that I'm going to have a gravely insignificant answer to, I'm afraid. I'll say a bit what other people have said about those three. These are metaphysical ideas. By metaphysical, I mean they're beyond the physical. They're things that, something like truth, for instance, isn't something that you primarily know or experience with your body or feelings. It's something you know and experience primarily with your mind. And so it's in this category of things called metaphysical. The same goes for goodness, and the same goes for beauty. And goodness, truth, and beauty are what some medieval authors called transcendentals. And I don't know entirely everything they meant by that, but part of it is that they are they are forces that order our existence. And one author, the great medieval theologian and philosopher who goes by the name of Thomas Aquinas,
right,
he outlined the relationship between these three things. Everybody throughout the great periods of medieval and ancient philosophical and theological writing were talking about goodness and truth all the time. They were talking about beauty a little bit too, much more than today, but goodness and truth were a little bit more obvious what they were. Beauty was a little bit different. So the way that Aquinas parsed the three, at least with reference to beauty, which I can speak to, is that he called beauty, this is a paraphrase, the splendor of truth. I'll explain what he meant by that. And he called goodness beauty the form. He called beauty the form of goodness. So what did he mean by these? He meant that we all know what truth is, at least intuitively, but how do we experience truth? Beauty, when something is beautiful, when the truth is beautiful, the truth then becomes clear and resplendent to us. It shines before us. If you think of in any kind of revelation you've ever had in life, an epiphany of sorts, about a family member or your passion for something, or a vocational epiphany, whatever it might be. You were out in nature or something, when someone's had a child for the first time, often they soon have some kind of epiphany. An epiphany is when kind of knowledge comes to you in a certain way, but it has a greater impact on you, and you see something with greater clarity than you previously saw it. It is the thing that is making you see, that force that's making you see the truth of the world with greater clarity and in a stronger light. That is the beautiful. And then likewise with goodness, how does beauty relate to goodness? Aquinas says that beauty is the form that goodness takes. So we can think about duty, moral duty. You have a duty to do the right thing. Or you can think about goodness in terms of moral goodness. It's good for me to do something. It's good for me to serve my neighbor, to help somebody in need, or whatever it might be. It's good for a child to obey their parents. The form that goodness takes, practically speaking, is the beautiful. So when you are moved to do something good, you are moved because you're inspired by the beauty of the action. You're not moved.
Oh,
And this is
fascinating.
and this
That's
is a
fascinating.
this is one of the great lessons that the history of writing on beauty can teach us, is that it's beauty that moves people. We're not moved to act by truth, even though sometimes we think we are. And even though we want what is good, we're not really moved to pursue what is good by goodness. We're moved by beauty. It's what stirs our souls. I know that sounds cliche, but beauty stirs our souls, and it moves us to act for the sake of things that we know are true and that we believe to be good.
I like that. That's really strong. Now you have a university, Hildegard. What is it called, Hildegard?
We have founded a small alternative micro college, a very different kind of college in Costa Mesa, California, called Hildegard College. Yes, we're just finished our third year.
And what do you teach?
So I teach across the board at the school, but the college only offers one degree. We're a very different kind of school. So I came from, as the other people that are involved with Hildegard did, I came from a very conventional academic setting, a school with 50 to 70 different majors and a bunch of different departments, graduate programs, a lot of research going on, all kinds of things. An army of bureaucratic staff. And I wanted to get to the pure experience of transformative education. I wanted to get back to that. I wanted to get back to learning in relationship through mentorship. I wanted to get back to guiding students through the greatest ideas as written in the greatest texts that history has to offer. And then I wanted to train students to do something with that deep knowledge and conviction, to build things for the good of society themselves. And so myself and a couple other people founded Hildegard College. We offer one bachelor's degree in liberal arts and entrepreneurship. That's what the degree is called. There are two things.
And entrepreneurship?
Yes, entrepreneurship. They're usually kept far apart from one another at universities.
Well, you think of, they don't even seem related. When I talk about, and you're talking about them as they're one thing.
Well, so our motto, it's in Latin, but I'll translate it to English, is 3 words. And that explains how entrepreneurship and liberal arts relate. The motto is to seek, to love, and to build. And so it begins by saying, we can't just provide professional training and teach people how to build new organizations and businesses and services and products, because we don't know what kind of soul these people have. We don't want disordered people making things for other folks. So we need to begin with formation. And formation starts with seeking what's good and what's true and what's beautiful. And students do that through what's called a great books curriculum, in which they're reading the greatest books that have been written across economics and philosophy and literature and physics and natural sciences, theology, the arts. They're reading the greatest books from antiquity to the present. They read a couple hundred books in our program. And discuss them around a common table. They're seeking what is good and true and beautiful, but it's not enough for you to do that, because just having the knowledge doesn't make you equipped to do something about it in the world. You have to not just know what is good, you need to love what is good. So you need to be formed as a person in such a way that you're going to not just be able to identify that's true, that's false, that's good, that's bad, that's beautiful, that's ugly, but actually fall in love as a person with what's good and true and beautiful. And then the third step after seeking, loving, is finally building. Once you've had that, right, don't hide your light under a bushel, so to speak. We want to guide students in how to create beautiful things entrepreneurially in college. So our students are not taking conventional business classes or leadership classes, or sitting in the back of lectures or taking examinations. They are learning entrepreneurship by applying principles they're taught from value proposition design and business modeling and financial planning and marketing and growth and business development and AI technologies, whatever it is. They're taking all of these tools that our faculty give them and they're applying them to real things that they're building, real ventures, products, programs, and services that they're designing and then piloting, testing, and sometimes launching into the world. Everything is application forward on that entrepreneurship side. So you could think of us as doing two things at Hildegard College. One is very, very old school, sitting around a table, reading ancient books together and diving into them for the wisdom they have to offer us, on the one hand. So old school that hardly any school does that anymore. And then on the other hand, doing something that is rather experimental and innovative in terms of traditional university education, and inviting our undergraduates to participate in what we call the entrepreneurship lab, where they're designing, testing, piloting, and launching real ventures themselves as a way of learning. They're failing all the time at this. We want them to fail. We want them to have a resilience to failure. But they're also succeeding and growing and really loving it as they're doing it. As you can imagine, it's a lot of fun.
So you and my friend Jeff Tanner, you are partners in
Yep.
developing
Jeff is
this.
my co-founder of Hildegard. Yes.
Yes. So how do you teach that? How do you teach people to create an experience through an entrepreneurial window, beauty, goodness, and truth?
Oh, wow. What a question. How do you use what we call the entrepreneurial arts to pair
Okay,
with
the
liberal
entrepreneurial
arts?
arts.
We coined
And is that beauty, goodness, and truth?
No. So the liberal arts, which people think of as the humanities, but think of as the humanities and the sciences together,
Right.
studied for their own sake, as the one part of our curriculum. The other part of our curriculum is what we call the entrepreneurial arts, which just means the study of entrepreneurship. But we use the term entrepreneurial arts because it mirrors the liberal arts in a way that really reflects how students experience it here. How do students, when they're studying entrepreneurship and designing their own ventures, how do they do it in such a way that seeks and reflects their learning around goodness, beauty, and truth? It's a powerful question. I would say that is our aspiration as a college. One way that we do it is that when students sit down in our entrepreneurship courses, and when I say entrepreneurship classes, don't think of a lecture hall. This is a workshop setting. There's a faculty teaching them and guiding them. So there's professors teaching them, but students have to take ownership from day one. They have to be active, vulnerable, willing to put themselves out there and take risks. And when they come to our entrepreneurship classes, they're not beginning by saying, oh, I got this idea for, I don't know, whatever, plug in a new kind of sustainable agriculture model that I want to launch and implement 2 months from now. That's not where students are starting for us. Instead, they're starting by undergoing a process where they're identifying problems in the world that need to be solved. Problems in the world that need to be solved. They could be social impact problems like hunger or homelessness or economic injustice or whatever it might be. Or they could be practical problems. People are addicted to their screens, or people families are having a hard time navigating this new world of education as it's changing, or whatever it might be, technological problems. But we ask students not only to identify problems that they're passionate about, but to do the hard work of seeking to understand those problems. The reason I'm bringing this up is we're not an incubation lab for people, college students who want to create the next big tech startup necessarily. Most of our students aren't really working in tech at all. They're all using emerging technologies and AI, of course, as you have to. But many of our students are doing what they would describe as common good work. That is, they're building things that will have an impact for the common good. And by common good, what we mean is impact on society for the better that can be measured when you look at whether it affects the flourishing of the most vulnerable people in our society. So not just helping people in general or getting people more money or more food or more happiness, but looking at the people who need those things the most and who lack it the most. Is your work elevating them in some way? And if so, then it's common good work. This is language that our students use. And you can see that as it's one example of how they're translating what they're learning as they're in class in the liberal arts and great books, debating what's goodness and what's justice and what's beauty and what is, what's the best political model, what's the best economic model. They're debating these things through this great books curriculum. They're building these convictions. They're sharpening each other's ideas. And then they're immediately putting them to practice, not just by building things, but by really seeking to understand what our world is like, what the problems are there that need to be fixed.
That's wonderful. That is an incredible idea. How long have you been doing the university?
So we incorporated in 2021, and we started undergraduate classes in fall of 2023. So we're really, really young. We just finished our third year. So coming this fall will be the first time that we've had seniors here. We'll have 2 seniors total. Tanner and Kyle are their names. Look for them if you ever stop by here at Hildegard College. And so we haven't been going that long. We have created here, though, more than just an undergraduate program. Our design at Hildegard is to create an ecosystem of different stakeholders and different learners that surround and engage with our undergraduate students. So, for example, this fall, we're relaunching our Accelerator Creators cohorts. So these are small cohorts of a maximum of 6 people, and they're usually adult, early stage startup founders. They have an idea that they want to make into a reality, or they have the kind of a fledgling version of a business or organization or something that they want to build. And they create a peer circle under one of our coaches together. And then they sort of track with our students and sometimes participate in events with them over the course of 2 academic semesters as they're building their idea. So those are called creators cohorts. We are also this summer launching online entrepreneurship courses for high school students. So students can take self-paced classes in entrepreneurship, the way that we teach entrepreneurship, at least online. We've opened our entrepreneurship labs, so our entrepreneurship classes that our students do, we open those to students at other universities. It's called semesters at the lab. So students at least one neighboring university this next fall will be joining some of our students in their classes. And then in addition to that, we have a great community of educators and parents and grandparents of students and pastors of students, and then just community members, professionals, retirees, hosts, people who believe in the same things that we do and want to collaborate with us. And so these might be donors, these might be members. We have an entrepreneurship advisory board that holds open office hours with our students, that speaks at events, that provides advice to Jeff and I and the other people in our leadership team for the direction of the college. So we have all of these different groups that Hildegard is a small micro college on purpose. It's mentorship based. It's supposed to be a small cohort of students. But at the same time, there's this whole community of people around our students that all of us, I would say, including administrative staff and professors like myself, we're all directed towards the same thing, which is we want to form young people to solve our world's most critical challenges. That's what we want to do. We want to raise up the next generation of young entrepreneurially minded leaders who are also formed in such a way that we can trust the effect that they're going to have on the world.
That's wonderful. Now, something we talked about earlier before we did the show, and you made a statement, something to the effect, this is just my writing it down, that the function of education is to form students into being virtuous people. I like that a lot.
I think you mentioned to me that you'd never heard anything like that before. I was surprised that you said that.
I've never heard that.
It's
from a university?
Yeah. It's not a new idea.
No. I mean, it seems like that would be the history of education. But
At
it has
different
been
times,
bastardized
yeah,
in the 20th century
exactly.
into a very different form.
Yeah, there are lots of reasons why the shape of education, especially in Western societies and in the United States in general, specifically, has changed. There's lots of reasons why it's changed over the decades and centuries. One of the big ones that I think I we were discussing earlier, one of the forces is the rise of what's called pragmatism. It comes from pragmatist philosophy, especially the influence of a writer named John Dewey,
Right.
where we've always thought that education is for the good of a society. And that's why we fund education publicly, or that's why we have patrons in society that fund education privately. Education is for the sake of society. We want our citizens to become educated in such a way that they're contributing to our society for the good. But in
Do you know now that is what you want? Do you think that's what the universities are looking for?
That's a different question. That's a good question. That's a different question because I think that universities, I'm just going to give you my hot take right now. I think that universities, many of them at least, are so insulated from real economic market forces that even though they might say they are doing what they're doing, educating the way they are, operating the way they are for the sake of helping to create a better society through their graduates, I don't actually think that's any motivation of their decisions. I think the motivation of their decisions is to have a greater market share of college going students, to get more donor money, to elevate their status in national rankings of universities, to get a higher research, higher what's the word, recognition for research in different ways, to get more grants from the government and other private organizations. I think that it's a kind of arms race to get to be bigger and better and fancier and more selective in this hyper competitive higher education environment. So no. However, to answer your question, no, I don't think universities are really have in mind the betterment of society, but that's where universities come from. And by making society a better place historically, universities have meant by creating people that can do good and model goodness for us. But in the early 20th century, this changed in this industrialized educational environment under the influence of John Dewey and pragmatism in particular, to education being a public service so that people can plug into society. If you imagine society like a machine, they can plug into that little gearbox, or they can be that lever or whatever it might be, and do their part. Really, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone plays their part, but really without any unified vision of what a good society actually means. Maybe a functioning society is what they ought to use, but even there, education, the strongest innovations in education that we see historically came about when there was an ideal for which society existed. So if you think of the birth of great ancient philosophy in ancient Athens, and we're talking about 400 BC-ish, and you think of Plato's Academy and these great thinkers that came out of it, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, this academy and this form of liberal arts that we inherit today that began in Athens at the time, this didn't just come out of the mind of one philosopher. This came out of a society that had created democracy in its original form,
Right.
that had instilled onto its citizens the right to self-governing themselves, to govern themselves, and that had therefore formulated this idea that we need wise leaders. We don't just want people in charge who are powerful, who, might overwrite, can just outmuscle you. We want our leaders to be wise. And so therefore philosophy, which from the Greek means the love of wisdom, philosophy, the love of wisdom.
Right. Right.
Philosophy informs this kind of education that we call liberal arts education. There was an ideal in society. What is a society good for? We want a beautiful society. We want a virtuous society that allows for people to live lives of happiness and virtue themselves. In the 20th century, this all kind of crumbles away. We can't agree on what a good or virtuous society is. So, of course, we're not going to agree on education for the sake of virtue when it comes to individual students.
That's tell me, you've used the word pragmatism a couple of times.
Hmm.
Define for me that word. I think I know what it means, but I'm not sure I'm thinking what I think it means is what you think it means.
Yeah, I suppose when I'm using it in a technical sense. Think of pragmatism with a capital P, influenced by thinkers like Richard Rorty and John Dewey. It doesn't matter if we don't know who those are, though. And pragmatism is just this idea of um, defining society, defining the trajectory of society just through this idea of progress, rather than through an idea of goodness or order or justice. It's just progress. Pragmatism comes from this idea that we don't have God to guide us. We don't have a transcendental idea like virtue, which is the happy and good life, to guide us. We
Right.
don't have anything that is objectively beautiful to guide us. All we have to guide us is a moving target that we call progress, and we ought to, the ends justify the means in a certain way, which is what we traditionally associate with pragmatism or utilitarianism. We ought to chase that moving target of progress and evolve as we need to. So if religion no longer becomes useful for us, well, that's fine. Forget about religion. Or if the nobility no longer becomes useful for us, fine. Forget about the nobility, or whatever it might be. If museums no longer become useful for us, forget about museums. Or if, on the other hand, if they do become useful for us, let's make more museums. But you can see how this idea of usefulness or the pragmatic good becomes circular. It kind of chases its own tail, unless you're attaching it, anchoring it to something that has real transcendent meaning to begin with.
Do you know when you talk about virtue and you talk about goodness, truth, and beauty, and I think of those three virtues, do you know where I get my greatest value from those three greatest virtues?
Where is that?
Is from Christianity.
Where have you
I find
experienced that?
I find God, the very nature of God, of the goodness of God, and the goodness of creation, and love, and restoration of human beings. I find that to be good and truthful and beautiful. And I find, you were talking about Aquinas, one of Thomas Aquinas, um, um, I, I think they attended the same university at the same time, but Saint Bonaventure
Mm.
attended, they both attended the University of Paris in around 1250, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, different
And
places, but yeah, they're in the same milieu, so to speak.
yeah, and Bonaventure wrote a piece on Trinity that is just so beautiful. It is so wonderful. It is all about, it's not functional.
Mm.
It is loving and caring, and it's for the good of people.
Yeah, Charlie, it doesn't surprise me that when you hear goodness, truth, and beauty, and when you think about concepts like virtue, that you're able to ground the greatest meaning those ideas have for you in the Christian faith tradition. Because I
And
think,
it can be it doesn't have to be Christian. Mine is Christian, but
right,
I'm
yeah,
not saying that's the only religion that is found, but it seems to me a very religious sort of, you know,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing is that um, what the what the great religions of history all have in common, in particular Christianity and Judaism, but including other major religions, is they share one belief, among others maybe, but they share one prevalent belief, which is that humans can't save themselves. That's the belief they share. They all have this idea that humans are broken, and that you can think of from the Christian perspective original sin, or you can think of the depravity of the will. You could think of something. Humans need saving, and if we're to, it's not going to help if I just kind of keep to myself and try to reflect inward and try to find revelation or epiphany or enlightenment from within. That's not going to help because I'm still broken. We need help outside of ourselves. That's what historical religions all agree on. And something changed around the year 1800 where people began to reject organized religions and instead say, no, religion is actually the problem. It gets in the way of my own self-revelation. I need to be enlightened from within. And that experiment failed greatly. But we can blame that experiment that lasted for 120 years or so, maybe still going on. This idea of rejecting the idea that humans are broken and need help, need salvation outside of themselves. We can blame that partly for the fact that we're no longer very fluent in ideas and transcendent ideas like goodness, truth, beauty, wisdom, virtue. We don't think in those terms anymore because those are terms that assume, they imply that there are higher things than us, that we are parts and therefore participating in something whose meaning is greater than our own meaning. And for some people, I think that's
and if that's what you mean by salvation, because salvation is such a loaded term, it's a very, in Christianity, it's very conversionary. You want to convert from whatever you're into Christianity, and I don't view salvation that way. I view it much more the way you described it.
We could be talking about salvation from war, from the threat of violence from a neighboring city. We could talk about salvation from familial discord. There's all kinds of salvation, but yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I do believe in a specific form of salvation that comes through the Son of God, but yet I recognize across these great ancient religions this common denominator, especially among the monotheistic religions, that in a world that was created by and ordered and designed by a monotheistic God, humans are not the ultimate meaning. And that's a threatening idea to us today. But that's an idea that if we're going to understand anything that was written before the...
I have never heard that. That is the first time I've ever heard that humans are not...
Humans are not enough. I mean, this is... Even these great ideas about virtue, which, the word virtue comes from this Latin word vir, which is man, which just means like what makes an excellent human, what makes an excellent person. Even this idea, it's not really just a celebration of humanity. It comes with a recognition in the ancient world. This idea of virtue comes with a recognition that there is something towards which humans are naturally directed, something that we're oriented toward. And if we become misaligned with it, we're not going to hit the mark. We're going to miss the mark, this Greek word, hamartia. We're going to miss the mark, the archer missing the target, missing the bullseye. And so we need to stop and we need to reflect and we need to think, what is this thing that we're built for, or that we are naturally ordered towards, if you don't want to use the words of creation? What is that thing? And it begins with knowledge. The path towards happiness, the path towards beauty and goodness begins with stopping and reflecting on what is our world like? What are we like? What are we already naturally seeking, even though we don't know it, we can't name it specifically, and understanding what that thing is. And I think that world religions, especially monotheistic religions and Christianity specifically, address that head on. They address that head on. Well, you are made, as Augustine says in the beginning of his book, The Confessions, my heart is restless until it finds its home and its rest back in you, as he's speaking to God. Right. So this is something that we have to reckon with, the idea that, well, we're not enough ourselves. We're not we're broken. We need help or salvation from the outside. Where are we seeking that help and salvation from? And I don't mean anything cliche, like, well, we should just stop what we're doing and pray to God. I don't mean that, although I don't think that would be the worst idea in the world. But I do specifically mean, we're taking this back to education, the education, a formational education that changes who somebody is. It always has to begin with a prolonged period of deep thought and reflection and knowledge discovery. If it's not beginning there, then I think people are just fooling themselves.
We have, I can't believe how much time, we've been together almost an hour. And I didn't intend to go this long, but you are so engaging. I want to tell me the title of your new book.
I have a couple books coming out, but the one that I think would be of interest to people on this topic of beauty is being published by InterVarsity Press this year, 2026, later this year. And it's called The Lost Tradition of Beauty by InterVarsity Press, The Lost Tradition of Beauty. And if you're interested in reading some of my thoughts about beauty that made their way into that book, you can check out my Substack, which if you just go to the Hildegard College website, hildegard.college, and look at my profile, there's a link to my Substack or my blog, and you could read some of my thoughts on there.
Okay, I want to read that, but I also want to just make sure I have this in the show notes so people know how to get a hold of your book.
Sure.
Matt, yeah. What a great conversation. This is, I love what you're talking about. It is so unique that you just don't see a lot of this.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, Charlie. I've told you this before, but you're easy to talk with because you're such a naturally curious person.
A curious person. I am very curious. It's one of my five natural talents is curiosity. So with that, why don't we just wrap it up and say this has been a wonderful show. Thank you for coming on the show with me today. It's such a delight to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Charlie. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.